I want to talk about blackness, the book, my life, a little bit of tech stuff, and wrap it all into one. And why don't we just get started with this? First, a little bit more background of who I am. I am a stand-up comic. I've been doing comedy for about 10 years. Started off in Boston and moved to New York 4.5, 5 years ago. I co-founded this blog, Jack and Jill Politics. Started in the summer of 2006 with Cheryl Conti, and it's a blog about U.S. politics, usually from a black perspective. The watermelon is our logo, and that symbolizes intelligence. Most smart people love watermelon, and that's really all that there is to it. If you see something else, you should get yourself checked out because you have issues. You know, watermelon is just wonderful. I hosted a TV show on Discovery Science Channel a few years ago called Popular Science's Future Of. And it was really cool for me to be able to do this show. We traveled around the world looking at questions of how we might live in 10 to 20 years. Future of sex, future of play, future of habitat. And what I learned most importantly is that in the future, all black people will be required to wear wetsuits. So make sure you get yours because supplies are running out. Global warming is coming. And then I work as director of digital for The Onion, America's finest news source. I've been there for over 4 years, and I've had a great time. My chief contribution, however, is to be every black person in all the images that The Onion uses in its journalism. In this case, I played Obama's hillbilly half-cousin, Cooter Obama, and threatened to derail his campaign. Obviously, Cooter did not succeed, and others are still attempting to derail the president. This is a very important aspect of my life. I do a lot of public service work, a lot of community service and sort of volunteer efforts. And the chief thing that I do is I live hate tweet the Twilight movies. And so what that means is, first of all, Twilight is a terrible, terrible thing. It's basically like a stalker positioned as an object of desire to convince young girls that they want to live this sort of life that's very, very destructive to their egos and self-esteem. And it's horrible for America and the world. So I try to do what I can. So opening weekends, I go to the theater, I sit in the back, and I live tweet the movie, but with hate. So I call it live hate tweeting. And it's amazing. I've convinced several people not to see it. It's been worth that investment of my time. I kind of feel like that teacher that wants to reach one student. You know, if you can just change one life. So if I could just convince one person not to spend $15 on garbage, then I've done my job as a citizen. So that's pretty cool. And then I've written this book, and that's what we're here to talk mostly about. The book is called How to Be Black. I have a very simple marketing message. If you don't buy the book, you're a racist. And that's just true. It's not like a thing. It's not a hook. It's not a scam. And it works. It works. We actually found out after the first week that we made the New York Times bestseller list. So guilt works, ladies and gentlemen. I highly recommend it. You guys should try it in your Google products, and for those of you at home, in your products as well. So before I keep going forward, I want to go back a little bit and tell you not just what I've been up to, but where I've come from. And I'll go back a couple of generations. This is an image of my great-grandfather, Benjamin Lonesome, born in 1870 in Carrollton County, Virginia, born a slave, taught himself to read as the family story goes, moved to Washington, D.C. Now, some of you are thinking, wait, born a slave after the Emancipation Proclamation? Government doesn't always work, ladies and gentlemen. Government doesn't always work, and decrees are not always adhered to. But he moved to D.C., and he worked for the city, and he lived to be quite old, actually. And he had two daughters, one of whom was Lorraine Martin, who I didn't find out until 2005 that she was the first black employee in the U.S. Supreme Court building. And we found all these clips and our mom's stuff. Our mom had passed away, and so we're going through trying to figure out what to keep and what not. We're like, yeah, we have this great family history we did not know about. Now, our grandmother was a very proud woman. She's pretty well educated for the time. She traveled a lot more than was normal for black people of the era. She did not necessarily spend a lot of her own time raising her own daughter. And she had this really adorable daughter. This is my mother, Baratunde Thurston. You can see where my cuteness comes from. And so our grandmother sent our mother off to boarding school at age 8. In a little town called Cornwalls Heights, Pennsylvania. At the time, it was a rural farming community. Now it's a thriving suburb of Philadelphia. And my mother had some trouble adjusting to this environment. A little black girl away from her home in the city, cast off into an all-black Catholic boarding school. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar went to this boarding school. He was not Kareem Abdul-Jabbar at the time he went there. I'm not sure they would have admitted him if he had been. But my mother had some tough times at the school, so tough that she wrote letters back to her mother. And I want to share just one of them that my sister and I found. This is a letter in the 8-year-old handwriting sent from a daughter to her mother. Dear mother, I am having fun, but I do not like it here. I am mad at you. Please send me some cookies. Very important. And a Sparkle Plenty doll. Sparkle Plenty was his character, very, very popular back in the 40s and 50s. Please, they can have dolls here. Please send it because I do not have anything to play with. Yours truly, Arnita. So it's an adorable, sad letter from a daughter to her mother, but I want you to focus on the lower left corner of this letter. There's very neat handwriting, very different font, different color scheme. It says over. And when you flip the letter over, you see this note, which says, if your little girl is dissatisfied, we'd be glad to have her bed for children who are anxious to come. Signed, Sister. Which is sort of like the NSA wiretapping of, I guess, 1948. You got to protect the nation from little black girls that want dolls and cookies. It's very much a threat to the nation. So my mother did not stay long at that school, but she did stay within the confines of what was expected of a modern Negro woman. This is her as a teenager wearing a dress below the knees, carrying a basket probably full of happy feelings about America. I'm sure it was in that basket. She worked in our high school newspaper, but before long her social network changed and she started hanging out with people that looked like this. This is a dude named El Dorado. Like the car. And there are many people in the world who think they're cool. Some people watching this right now think you're cool, or know people who are cool. You're not. Your friends aren't. This dude, El Dorado, is the last cool person to ever have existed. Look at the shoes. Look at the phone. Look at the typewriter, the pants, the hair. Everything about this picture is cool. Cool is now an historical relic thanks to the high bar El Dorado set. But my mom didn't stop there. She started getting political. She was joining rallies. She was out in the streets. This is an African Liberation Day parade outside of Malcolm X Park in Washington, D.C., headed south on 16th Street Northwest. And right in the thick of it is my mom. Because the revolution may not be televised, but it could be photographed. You want your hair done up right. You want the eyes focused on the camera. Now, when I was born, my mother did not leave these politics behind. She very much infused them with me. And a lot of kids had little books when they were young. You had cartoons, you had See Spot Run and stuff like that. I didn't have that. This is my first book, pretty much, called This is Apartheid. I had another book called Africa is not a country, it's a continent. And when you are raised with this, like stark black and white photos of apartheid, it maybe has a little effect on you as a young person whose mind is being molded. Now, outside of our house was a very different picture. This was the constant view from our front window on Newton Street in the Columbia Heights neighborhood of Washington, D.C. Lots of drug dealing stuff going on, very much like The Wire. When The Wire came out, I was traumatized and excited. It's like, I love this show, but I have flashbacks because my neighborhood was just like The Wire. You know, we had the drug dealing, the police corruption. We had everything The Wire had, right, except for universal critical acclaim and the undying love of white people who saw it. Our neighborhood did not have that, but otherwise it was very similar to The Wire. So my mom helped navigate me and my sister through this environment, and we had this very proud moment at my college graduation from Harvard, and she gave me this big hug and said, "We did it!" And my sister is so proud of capturing this moment. She's like, "I'm the best photographer ever." And so that's kind of where I have come from, and it's the foundation of what this book is and kind of this conversation that I want to start off with you guys here today. So let me talk about how the book was born. First one, there's a lot of the personal stuff in there, but there's also like a tech story too, and I think it's pretty interesting to be talking about that at Google. The book was born on Twitter via a hashtag, and essentially I was shopping for wine. And I didn't know how to buy wine. There's all this history of wine and flavors and the air of frankincense. I don't know how to do all that stuff. And I was also not interested in learning. So I just wanted a bottle of wine. I went through the shop and I saw this brand of wine called Negro Amaro. N-E-G. Oh, we're going to have to riot now, aren't we? We are just, this is a Black History Month. A black man can't speak at Google without some white guy talking loudly over top of him. This is ridiculous. I got 29 days, man. Come on. You can interrupt me in March. I will not complain. Anyway, I was talking about my ignorant wine purchasing decisions. And so I saw this brand of wine called Negro Amaro. I was like, that spoke to me. Negro wine. This is perfect. That's why I'm going to buy it. And so I posted to Twitter, and I was trying to antagonize my friend Elon James White, who's a great comedian, does a web series called This Week in Blackness and Blacking It Up. And I said, this weekend I picked my red wine because it was called Negro Amaro. That's how black I am. Elon James, how black are you? I was just sort of picking the fights, playing a little joning back and forth, and then he responded, I see the subtle racial implications of Thundercats. Panthro is black, shirtless, and Lion-O's driver. How black are you? And so we went back and forth volleying, and hundreds of other people weighed in and threw their own observations on how black are you. And in the audience for this was a member of the HarperCollins team, a woman named Debbie Steer, and she brought me in, and we had a nice conversation. They said, you should write a book. Why don't you write a book called How Black Are You? And I was like, why don't I not do that? That is a terrible idea. Because it was one thing to have that conversation and that tension and that battle between two people who know each other, two people who are comedians, and we have assumed the best intentions. I didn't want to hit America with that. I didn't trust America with that. I just had visions of watermelon dancing in my head. And like people like, how black are you? I drink grape soda all the time. I'm like, no. America's not ready for how black are you at the Walmart bookshelf. Like, we can't do that just yet. We have some ways to go. But they said, well, what about how to be black? And I was like, yes, that is ridiculous. You can't answer that, thus I want to try.